This is Andy Masur, the podcast.
Your reputation precedes you.
I have to admit, I wasn't expecting an invitation back.
They're called orders, Maverick.
This episode, Andy sits down with one of the extraordinary people responsible for shooting the box office smash, Top Gun Maverick. Veteran cameraman John T. Connor.
What he has to teach you may very well mean the difference between life and death.
They'll discuss what it was like filming this movie as well as the other box office hits he's had in a career that spanned over 30 years. Here's Andy Masur, the podcast.
Well, the intros don't get any better than that, especially for a guy that actually knows our big voice man, Ernie Skadden. Yeah. That is John T. Connor, who's kind enough to join us here today on Andy Masur, the podcast. Yeah, you know that guy a little bit, don't you?
We go way back. Yeah, definitely. Kids in the streets playing, at the block parties and doing all kinds of crazy kid things. Yeah, that was us.
Well, you're supposed to do that when you're kids, right?
Yeah. We stayed past the lights turning on the street. We definitely were the ones out last. Yeah. Good times.
Well, John, I really appreciate you taking the time. It's a little bit of a departure for the podcast here. We usually talk a lot of sports, but I'm really into music, and I'm fascinated by photography. I take pictures, and I've actually sold a few here and there, and it's fascinating to me the way an eye kind of develops for a photographer. Did you always have that eye when you before you got into this?
Well, funny enough, I was born into it, so I've been doing it since I was one. My dad was in the business. Funny enough, he operated on the first Top Gun. And then 33 years later, I operated on the sequel. So it was a very interesting turn of events that brought me there. But, I was brought up in the same kind of crowd, and that's how I ultimately ended on the same movie 33 years later. Even though the director of the original movie, had committed suicide and wasn't on the recent movie, but he was going to do it, and he was excited about it, and we were really good friends. I did 6 or so movies with Tony Scott and commercials, and played around with him, and otherwise I would have been into sports, but the business kind of took me that way. It's not a job, it's a way of life, kind of like sports. It is your life. It's everything. And I just, next thing you know, 35 years later, here I am, worked my way up the ladder from the bottom. There's a little nepotism, of course, as there is in sports as well. Formula One drivers are expected to be as, better than their dads. And, so that was my goal, was to be as good, if not better than my dad, ultimately. Same as any other kid, I think, imagining, following in their father's footsteps, so to speak. But yeah, I wound up on this movie, and it was just an amazing once in a lifetime experience. Especially the aircraft carrier portion of it was, really wild, to even go do for, 9 days out at sea. With no communications, which was really cool too, because in this day and age, obviously we can't live without our devices. So yeah, it was a very, very wild, cool experience, and it's great to know it's doing really well too. So that's a big help for my career. So
yeah, and very rarely are sequels judged to be better than originals, and I haven't seen it yet. I do plan on seeing it this weekend, and everybody that I've heard from talks about how this movie seems to kind of grasp people better than the first one did, and I love the first one.
Yeah, no, it changed the world for a lot of people, mainly the Navy. As I talked to everyone in the Navy that was there on the ships, everyone was there because of the original movie. I mean, this is why it was the biggest advertising situation for a movie ever, and still holds to this day, and it affected a lot of people. I mean, a lot of us grew up in that time, and it was a pretty cool time in the 80s, and that movie was pretty hip, and it still holds. You watch it now and it still holds. I actually have not seen the movie, funny enough, I missed the premiere. I was working on this show, Jack Ryan, the season 4 in Budapest, Hungary. So I missed it by 2 days. But my father did get to go. So he's, 85 now, and he's fully retired. And it was just a blast for him to see, the movie and see my name where his name was and all that jazz. So it's full circle for that. And but yeah, I'm hoping to see it tonight. So
what was your dad's critique? Did he give you any critiques?
No, he said nailed it, which is good to hear from him. He collaborated with the director, and the actors and everything to make it what it was. And we, with the technology that we have today, I think that's why, people are saying that it might be a better movie in a sense, because the technology is just amazing, and the quality. And then, of course, Tom, has exploded in his world as far as power and what he can make. I think right at the end of that, he's like, okay, the next movie's in space, and I don't know if that'll happen, but hopefully I'm available.
Yeah, I was going to say, you get a free trip to space, right?
Yeah, that could be interesting. It's not something you do every day, but yeah, it's a great business, and it's different every day, and it's challenging, and so it's really been a cool ride, but also a tough ride. It's getting established and getting your name out there, and it's not who it's who knows you. So it's a business that's pretty small, but also very big worldwide now. So yeah, it's good to be on the upper echelon of movie making and cinema and such. And I'm glad that it's made it through, COVID and everything, because, our business, is constantly having to adapt to where we're working or wherever. I was in Chicago on Fargo and got to see Ernie and be back in Chicago where I grew up. And so that was kind of cool. That took me back there, and you never know where you're going to go, but it's a great industry, but it's very challenging on the family life, of course, like any, sports person or musicians or military. It's always tough going away. I go away for 5-6 months and come back, and it's really tricky, but it's what we love to do.
So much in there I want to dissect here. I want to get back to the actually being on the set in the movie in just a second. But you mentioned something too about the technology, and I can only imagine what the differences be between the first time you were behind the lens and the last time you're behind the lens, and just what light years we are now ahead of things, and how much easier it is to do your job. Not that your job is easy, but I'm sure it makes it a little bit less challenging at times.
It got a lot easier for what I did for 25 years is I pulled focus. And the technology around that is almost pulling focus is almost automatic at this point. There's still quite a lot that, is technical, and you do need good people doing it. And there are good and bad people out there at doing it. But it was one of the more challenging jobs on the set, and when it was filmed, you didn't know how you did until you saw the dailies, the film the next day. So you would go home really not knowing how you did and hoping you did. And it was one of the most jobs, that got fired from, it was a tricky situation. So yeah, now with digital, you know how you did when you go home at the end of the night, and it's a lot less stressful. The weekends were really tough, and you come back to work the next day. And luckily I had a really good run of I was never fired, and I was one of the top in my field for that. I got a Lifetime Achievement Award for that, and my last movie was The Revenant, so I went out kind of on a big movie, really difficult, high stakes situation. So yeah, that was a good career there, and now I'm moving up to the top job, which is the cinematographer, and trying to be the main person on the camera department.
It's interesting because listening to you describe the way you had to go through the business, it's every business. I mean, I'm telling you, in sports, I was doing play-by-play, and you start on the high school ranks, you start to go to the college ranks. I eventually worked my way up to the big leagues, and it's
Yeah.
just amazing how that transcends not just what I do for a living, but what you do for a living.
Yeah, no, it really is, and it's fun to watch both. You know, it's fun to watch people coming up in sports, and you know, in the high schools to college to pro, and you know, it's the same kind of situation, and you know, it's really great when people stay humble, and that's one thing that I've tried to do. Watching my father and how people really respected him, I've really tried to mold myself because it's a challenging business. You know, patience and stress and you know it's all there and I think actually the movie behind the movie would be amazing of what goes on behind the scenes you know of movie making obviously and pro sports as well and all things but what it takes to actually make you know it takes a village and it's a great collaboration of a team you know.
Yeah, what it takes to make the donuts, you know? I mean, it's you just want to eat the donuts. You don't really care
Yeah,
sometimes how it gets put together, but
yeah,
it's all
exactly.
about that, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it really is. It is. It's a great intricate working part that we all do to make it happen, and it feels really good. You know, a movie coming out like this, doing really well, getting notoriety. I mean, I get texts every few hours saying something, you know, and that doesn't happen very often. I mean, maybe on The Revenant it happened. I also worked on Fight Club many years ago. You know, I got a bunch of accolades for that, but it's far and few between of the championships or everyone's a championship team, but you don't always get there. So it's always nice to be in that winning circle, so to speak.
All right, so take us inside a little bit here about actually making the donut and what a day is like on a set, and you know how much prep there is even before the actors get out of the set, and how much time you actually spend, you know, before they even show up.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's all about prep. That's the key in anything. Again, sports and everything. It's like you got to be ready for it. And you know, Jamie Foxx, I worked with him on a movie about sports called All Star Weekend, and it's about basketball. And you know, it and unfortunately didn't make it out, and maybe will someday. But we did it about 4 years ago, and he directed it, and it's the first thing he directed. And he acted in it, and he played three parts. It was fantastic. We had an all-star cast. Um, but you can look it up on IMDb. I think it tells a little about it. But it was when Curry, you know, was at a different team, and so it's not even really relevant now. So I don't know if it'll come out. But anyway, he said, you know, making a movie is like a playing basketball game, like with a bunch of people, like a pickup game. And you know, you throw the ball at one person, and it goes out of bounds. And you know, the first time you play basketball with anybody, it's crazy. And the second time you go out and play, you know, alley oops are happening, and the passing and the assists and everything works really well. But it's, you know, as he said, it's really tricky. So it's about prep. But you know, the first time you put a bunch of people together, no one knows how things work. It's like a new team, you know. So it's really tricky, but you know, everyone has a job to do, and everyone's really good at it, and that's why they're there. They're all hired by the producer, and they hire the best people they know and put them together and hope they're a team that works. And it's all about the prep again. But you know, making a movie like this, there's also, you know, safety concerns. You know, I've almost been killed a few times. My dad was almost killed at least 3 times. You know, he was on the set of Twilight Zone where the helicopter came down and killed 3 people. And, you know, we go home at the end of the night, and you know, it's a dangerous thing that not many people really realize. We take safety courses, safety classes, you know, but, you know, a cinematographer was killed on a set, as we all probably heard, you know, last year with a gun that was loaded but wasn't supposed to be, and don't even still really know where that's going. It's so yeah, it's a really for many years it was like a circus, you know. It was like we're traveling circus, and we're like carnies. Like there were no rules, there was no OSHA barely was involved. There's no regulation in the movie industry. It's the one business that was not regulated at all. So, you know, accidents happen, and we push the envelope all the time, and definitely push the envelope on Top Gun with, you know, everything, and stunts and flying, and obviously. But again, it comes down to the prep and the, and all that goes into the thought process of all the people. It's pretty crazy business for sure.
And with technology, you get the CGI, you get the computer, you get generated graphics and things like that. But what you see is really, it has to be shot through that lens. I mean, it's still a dangerous situation if you're on an aircraft carrier, for goodness sakes. You never know what's going to happen out there with planes coming down, and you're where you are, and you have to get the shot.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's pretty wild and pretty cool. I mean, we used to do Marlboro commercials with horses, and we've had cameras trampled over and people almost hit, and it's amazing experience, but it's just good people all around make it happen, and it's a real fun team situation at the end of each film. You have a family, and then you all split up, and sometimes you see each other again, and sometimes you'll get teamed up again, and sometimes there's another sequel. But we'll see if this spawns a whole franchise of Top Guns.
All right, so the camera operating on a movie like Top Gun, I mean, we're taking inside the cockpit. You're kind of outside the cockpit. You're kind of flying alongside of these guys. I mean, it's got to be the thrill of a lifetime, first of all. But yet, how does all that work? Because you're working in such a confined space with an aircraft like that, the ones that they're flying.
Yeah, I mean, we came up with the technology again. Came up with a very small camera Sony made called the Sony Venice, and in this Rialto mode, the camera kind of pops off the main part of the camera, and you can put it anywhere, and it's just a little module with a lens on it. And we had 6 of them in the aircraft, shooting the actual pilot and then shooting backwards at the actors that are actually in the plane, making it look like they're flying. It's so I don't actually get to operate too much on that. Those are considered lock-off shots. And I just stayed on the ground, and the planes took off. We came back, and we set the cameras and set them to the height of the people, and there was a lot of research and development, obviously, with the camera assistants, and getting everything had to be approved from the FAA, the military. I mean, cameras mounted on, that's not normally something they do. So there was a lot of collaboration between, the military and the camera people, and something that's not really done that often. We jump into things wherever it is, and people love, stepping up and doing something cool. I mean, I was on the aircraft carrier, and the planes were taking off in a direction, and I wanted the sun behind them. And I asked the captain of the aircraft carrier if we could turn the ship. And he's like, because originally when Tony Scott shot the movie in 85, he wanted to turn the ship, and the military was like, well, that's going to cost $10,000. And then the producers were like, yeah, we're not paying for that. And Tony was like, I'll write you a check. And supposedly he wrote a check and paid him $10,000 to turn the ship. So anyway, cut to, 2 years ago when I'm on the ship, and everyone had left. Tom Cruise had left, and the main crew had left, and they left me, for 2 days to shoot on the ship. And Tom was about to launch off the ship, and he came up to me and he said, shoot good shit. And then he took off. So that gave me, creative license for 2 days to run around the ship and get cool shots. And then to this scene where I wanted to turn the ship, and the captain or the guy, the liaison below, called up to the captain, and the captain said, yeah, sure, we can turn the ship. The pilots are going to be flying into the sun with a crosswind, which is we don't normally do, but it's for the movie. So guys, make it good and make it cool. And they did it. So it was pretty awesome to have that kind of happen, turning a
times have
military
changed.
ship.
Times have changed, right?
Yeah, but the camera operating was, generally really tricky. For most of the dialogue scenes and the scenes in the movie, Tom is very much involved. He's very intense, and he knows what's good. And we ended up reshooting a bunch of the movie because once he saw it, he wanted more dynamic shots and this and that. And So we went back and went to every scene in the movie and added a little bit. It was unlike normal movies. You know, we finished the movie and then there's a couple of maybe days to put things together and do a little couple extra shots here and there, some planes flying by. But yeah, we reshot for 6 months to make it cool and all, you know, backed by Tom and what he, you know, what he wanted and what he thought was cool, which I think he did, you know, pretty damn good job. But it's a very intense working environment. It's no walk in the park, that's for sure, when you're on set.
I would imagine too. It's kind of intimidating at times, perhaps, to work with some of these stars that have been in huge blockbuster movies and
Yeah,
have that name recognition. And then you see them walk on this set, and you're like, "Hey, that's Tom Cruise." I mean,
yeah,
I've had the same thing with when you try to go interview players that are all stars
yeah,
and Hall of Famers. I mean, I imagine it's the
yes,
same kind of feeling.
exactly. You're just in awe and just, you know, what they've been, what they've accomplished, and what they do, what they stand for. It's everything. Yeah, we call it the pucker factor. uh, you know, yeah. There's some people that didn't make it through. You know, some people that were let go, and you know, and it's tricky. You know, it's very intense, but you really have to be a chameleon and adjust to, you know, the situation wherever it is. So yeah, it's truly a wild business that I really enjoy doing. I can't imagine doing anything else. Well, maybe race car driving, but
The thrill. You can't escape the thrill, can you?
nope, no, no. We
That's
gotta
all right.
have it. We live for it.
I would think too in this kind of business, and I guess it's the same in any. You have to have real thick skin. You have to be able to compartmentalize, if that's a good word to use, about the fact that Tom Cruise is not ripping on you personally. He's ripping on just what he wants to see rather than what you've shown him.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it, actually. Yeah, and from Chicago, so I had the thick skin, and but yeah, it's definitely there's egos, and and you have to do, you know, you have to be the right person and adjust. So it's definitely, you know, you're not taught that in school so much. But because I literally, you know, got right out of high school and went right into the business. I started at the bottom, like mailroom of a, you know, corporation. I started as the production assistant and was getting coffees and taking the film to the lab, and, you know, worked my way up for years and years in each part of the camera department, and then and it's great to be at the top and have that um, you know, behind me.
So you mentioned, as we're taping right now, you haven't seen Maverick yet. Now, I'm curious too, from your perspective. You kind of know you know the secret sauce because you've been there. And when you
Yeah,
go to watch this movie, what is it like for? I mean, can you actually just relax and take it in, or are you constantly going, "Man, I missed that shot. Man, I should have gotten that shot."
yeah. I have to see a movie twice. The first time, it's kind of a walk down memory lane. It's kind of a like, oh, we went through that to get that, and yeah, well, that day got that, and oh, that, yeah, that's so yeah. There's a bit of that. I try to enjoy a movie, and probably one of your questions would be, how do you know it's good or not? And you never really do when you're working on it. You know, you really don't know if it's going to be good, and it's a movie can be made or broken in the edit alone. You know, so I've had a lot of movies that I've worked on that never made it out, like I said, and you know, it's really a tricky thing to find out what is good. You know. Um, my dad worked on some great movies back in the future, back in the future, back in the past as well. And you know, he never really realized what movie. You know, he did E.T. You know, and uh, many other movies that are, you know, kind of like in the past, like Deliverance. You know, which was a really gnarly movie. You know, on the river, and then I did The Revenant, and we had Leo in the river, but he was in a cage controlled on a belt, you know. Whereas on Deliverance, they were in rafts and they were going down the rapids, you know. And there was everything is done so much more controlled now in the industry. Everything is you know, is thought out and planned. Where it was a lot more kind of guerrilla in the old days. So a lot of that's gone, and a lot of the art side of it's gone, and it's gotten much more corporate now. You know, we lost someone to a harassment suit that he just said something wrong to the wrong person, and then boom, he was gone. And you know, it's a completely different world now. It used to be a free for all. There was obviously a massive amount of drugs in the business and in the budgets, and that's how some of these great movies got made, was on an amazing amount of drugs. Like, I don't know how they did it, but you know, it's a much more controlled business now. Seeing that changes over the last 30 years has really been the biggest change of the business, I would say.
So you mentioned kind of the hierarchy in the movie business there. You know, the producers are the ones that are funding the film, and they're the ones that are hiring all the talent and hiring the camera operators and such. The director is the kind of the manager of the team, if you will, because he's there all the time. She's there all the time.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's got to be a little bit different with each different individual, because they probably have their own unique styles and how they like to get from point A to point B. Sometimes it probably goes from point A to point 8.5 to 8.6
Yeah.
to B, but
Yeah.
some, you know, probably could skip B and go to C.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's very true. Some directors, you know, they know your job. Some don't. Some know your name. Some don't. You know, it's really a different, and you have to adapt to that as well. You know, you work with David Fincher, who, you know, I did Fight Club and Panic Room and Girl with a Dragon Tattoo with him. He's very intense and knows your job. And, you know, if you're weak, he'll just fire you. You're just gone. You just don't come back. You know, other directors, you know, just completely rely on you, and they just, you know, deal with the actors, and then some are more hands-on. Some are very much into art department and very much into what the look is, and some, you know, just kind of, you know, over a generalization of it, and they let everyone do their kind of creative, and then some, you know, so yeah, everyone's always constantly adjusting to that side of it. And you're going with this director, you're like, oh, okay, that's okay, I'm going to be in that mode. You know, Spielberg only does 1 or 2 takes. That's it. You rehearse it, and you know what you're doing, and you roll camera, and that's it. Got it. Oh, I had one technical problem. Okay, we'll go one more time. On the other hand, David Fincher does 26 takes of the same thing over and over and over again, to the point of where you've gotten so used to the thing that you're sick of it, and then like you emotionally come back around and like approach the character different. There's all kinds of different approaches to that. But yeah, the director is normally king. Sometimes the director hires the crew, and sometimes the cameraman hires the crew, and sometimes the producers hire. It depends. Like Tony Scott had everything to do with everyone on the set. Michael Bay, same thing. You know, he controls everything. He looks at, you know, oh, you don't need 2 of these tripods. You don't need, you know, he gets right into the micromanaging of the camera package. And then some directors don't even know what a camera package is, you know. So, yeah, it's a wide variety. TV shows are more directed by committee and the producers and the showrunners, and the director's not king on a TV or streaming as they are in movies. Movies, the director is really king. I mean, unless it's a director that's never directed before, and then there's, you know, a bunch of people steering him or her in a direction, and they, you know, either do good or fail, or it's a lot of uncharted waters for things. But you hire good people around you, and you're taken care of, and that's normally what you do. I think they even tell you that in film school. You know, you don't have to be good, just get a bunch of good people around you, and you'll. Unfortunately, that's the business now, and it's much more saturated. You know, it was much more difficult to get in. You know, the unions were tough, and you had to know somebody to get in the old days, and they just weren't letting everyone in. And there was a group system. You know, if you were one of the top guys, you worked all the time, and if you weren't working, then no one else could work down below you. And the group 2 and 3, you know, 3 couldn't work unless 1 and 2 were working. And now it's a free-for-all. It's very saturated. You know, it's a very different business in the sense that, you know, anyone can do it now with video cameras. The technology changed all that. You know, when it was filmed, you had to know what you were doing. You couldn't wing it. You couldn't fake it. With a digital camera, you know what you get, right, when you look at it. So, right, I mean, there's still many things to obviously learn, and a huge amount of things to learn, and we're always learning. You know, I'm still learning in 33 years in the business, but you know, there's no real set rules. You know, it's all kind of like winging it, you know, and figuring it out on the day, and sometimes don't work, and we go retry them again, and but yeah, it's definitely a crazy job, way of life we have.
So I sit in a movie theater and it's 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And I sit there and I take it in and I go home and go about my day. 2 hours takes sometimes what, 2 years to complete the project. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I mean, most movies now they've gotten smaller in the newer, you know, years of things of making things. There's a much tighter schedule, but most movies are, you know, anywhere from 60 to 100 days. It used to almost all be over 100 days. It's very rare now, but yeah, it's you know, on the Revenant we filmed, you know, basically 2 minutes of a day, so it took over, you know, a year plus. Um, you know, with smaller movies like Wag the Dog, I know she just popped up there. We did that in 30 days. And it's the same hour and a half. Obviously, there's not as many things going on, but obviously the bigger explosions and car stunts and, you know, second units of big things that you're doing, or if VFX, or, you know, obviously your time can really expand. But a simple little, you know, movie is 30 days or 20 days even. I even did a movie in 15 days, and I did 3 movies back to back, war movies in 15 days each, so 45 days for 3 movies. So very challenged, very no money, not many crew, not many, you know, you don't have many tools to use, so it's very challenging. On the bigger movies, yeah, you know, you literally shoot sometimes a half a page of dialogue, which, you know, is, it could be the world burning though. You know, the script could read Atlanta burns, you know, half a page, you know, and it's like, it's obviously a big thing. So yeah, most projects are right around 3 months.
Okay. So it does allow you a little flexibility if you want to work on multiple projects within 1 year. I mean, it kind of confused me a little bit because to think that, you know, you're committed to one project for as long as you are, and sometimes you may let some other things have to go by because you're working for you know,
Yeah,
a big production.
yeah. I've turned down some bigger movies than I've done some. I've turned down a lot of great movies, and sometimes you burn the bridge, and sometimes you go back and yeah, it's a freelance business. So, you know, I'm actually unemployed now, happily, after 113-day Jack Ryan in Budapest and Canary Islands. So yeah, I'm happy to take a little time off, but I'll have to get back at it in the next few weeks. But yeah, you just got to find your next job and then choose that job, and then sometimes there'll be a few. And yeah, I had to make a choice between Top Gun and shooting a show, and I was operator on Top Gun and DP on a show, and I turned down the bigger move to do the bigger movie. And even though the camera operating doesn't really forward my career because I'm not operating anymore, really per se, that you know, it's kind of like just being involved in the project is getting me some, you know, traction, so to speak, in where I'm going. But ultimately, it's not what I do. So it's, yeah, it's kind of a tricky thing. It was a tricky catch-22, rock in a hard place, you know, situation of which one do I do, and it's always tough. But you always make the right decision, right? Like with sports or whatever, you go to a different team. I've seen car racers go from one team where they're doing really well, they go to another team and then never do well, but they're happy because they're doing more, or they're the first main driver and not the backup driver, you know. So yeah, you know, it's tricky. I don't regret too many. I turned down Pirates of the Caribbean, which means I turned down 1, 2, 3, 4, however many there are, and burned the bridge with that, you know, crew. Um, because I chose to do another project and go a different direction, which, I look back on and I don't regret, but you never know, and then I gave a guy that job, which he did all the other ones, and put him in a really good spot. He thanks me one day, at one
Finally.
point. Yeah, at some point. But yeah, it's really tricky. That's the tough one, and especially when two big movies, or hopefully it's a good situation to be in. So you can never get upset that you're having to make a choice, because just being fortunate enough to have that situation is great.
So I'm looking at your IMDb page, and it reads like a who's who of movies. And I go back to one that I circled, and it was in 1990. You were the second assistant cameraman on Kindergarten Cop, and the
Oh
reason I
wow.
circled that is because I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, that starred Arnold Schwarzenegger. Your
Yeah.
name is John Connor.
Yeah.
That's the Terminator. What the?
Yeah.
How did that? Did you have a conversation with him about it?
Yeah, no, it was quite cool. I mean, that was quite a while ago. But yeah, he didn't believe me at first. But yeah, we got along really well because of that. And yeah, that's kind of where my career started, and took off from there on. I did really well, not because of Arnold, but just because of the projects I was involved in. Yeah, I worked with Robert Patrick years later, who was in T2. He was the cop, and I said, "Hey, I'm John Connor," and he's like, "Yeah, yeah, sure, buddy, yeah." And I'm like, "No, no, no, I really am. I'm John Connor." He's like, "Yeah, I get that all the time. Thanks." He just did not want to hear it. And I had to show him my ID, and I'm like, literally, just look. Yeah, no, it's been a good thing to have that name in the business. I put the T in there just because, to break it up a little bit, because everyone's like, wait, sorry. But it helps people remember a name, and it's come in handy over the past 30 years of having a famous name. Megan Fox came up to me once in an elevator on Transformers 2 when we were working on that, and she's like, "You got a cool name," and I'm like, "Wow, Megan Fox likes my name. That's awesome." You know what I mean? So yeah, it's been good. It doesn't get me into restaurants or anything like that. Get me deals or anything, but yeah, cool
So,
name.
yeah, definitely a cool name.
Yeah.
There's a couple of movies early in your career that I think I might have been the only one to watch them, but I enjoyed how I
That's
got into
amazing.
college. How I got into
Yeah.
college. That movie
Yep.
is
Wow.
so underrated to me because
Yep.
there's a lot of people in that movie that became, and we're talking about Top Gun with the little
Yep.
tie-in there with Anthony Edwards.
Yeah.
It's just one of those fun movies that I think at the time. Now it was 1989. That's when I graduated from college. I was going through all that stuff. That was my life at
Yeah.
that, trying to get in,
Right.
just 4 years earlier. But that was one of those movies that seemed to me it was underrated. I see it's on your resume. I'm like, yes, I got to talk to him about that one.
Yeah. No, it was good. It was good. I was new in the business at the time. I started in '87, so I was a puppy. I was pretty green, and yeah, my eyes were googly over this business and what we do and what we get to do and where we go. And yeah, it pretty much swept me in pretty quickly. But yeah, great experience, and I still work with some of those people that were on that project. It's amazing that you mentioned that. I just talked to someone the other day that had mentioned it. So it's it's a tight family that for years, and all the movies go down as great experiences and some bad ones. But yeah, that was a good time back in the '80s.
I'm glad I wasn't the only one to watch it though. I mean, that makes me feel better that you get something out of that one.
Yes, no, there's a few there that I'm embarrassed about, but they're on there whether I wanted them to be or not. I got joked around Sergeant Bilko, which was a comedy, which if you look at it, I didn't do too many comedies. I got into the action adventure, and that's kind of where you stay. Once you do a certain type of movie, you kind of stay in that because you're good at that. And I was able to kind of do that. It's like you don't want to get too stuck in horror, but you could be in a cult classic horror, so that could be good. So yeah, picking the genre that you want to work in, like sometimes you don't have a choice. You just go where the work is. But I always tried to pick the cooler projects that would come up. You obviously read the script and you try to guess on what kind of reading Fight Club, I never knew that would be a cult classic. I didn't think that it would be taught in film school and, and so well known. The movie only made $17 million and was gone in 3 weeks in theaters. So it's one of those things. My dad did one that did really, really, really well called Kung Fu something, where they took half of a Kung Fu movie and they put a new movie. They built a new movie around the old movie and put the two together, and it did really good. Kung Pao was the name of it, and it's a cult classic. I had no idea, and people come up to me and they're like, "Oh, your dad worked on wow," So yeah, you get a lot of that through the days of working on interesting projects and cool projects.
And then you got to work on one film that was an award winner, and Birdman with Michael Keaton. That was one of those movies I went to see, and I would imagine as a camera operator on a movie like that, I was dizzy a lot of times when I was watching that movie just because of the way everything was moving. But it worked.
Yeah, it was a pretty wild way to do things, and yeah, it was. I didn't do the whole movie. I just did a little bit of the work here in Los Angeles. I didn't actually get to work with Keaton. I know all the crew that did it, and the Steadicam operator that did the whole movie is a really good friend, Chris Harhoff. He is one of the top Steadicam guys, but he did all that work running through the hallways backwards and sideways, and I was just even in the industry, I was amazed at how they actually did that and pulled that off. It was definitely a feat, and to blend the shots together and this one kind of shot kind of idea was pretty cool. I did a couple of short films that no one saw that I did this type of photography in, and it's interesting. It's always an interesting way to do things. There's a movie now shooting in Prague that's doing a 30-minute one-shot deal, and it's a bunch of shots sewn together, but it looks like a one-shot kind of pass at everything, which is impossible. The stunts and everything it's called Extraction 2. They did the same thing in Extraction, where they're in a car chase and they throw the camera into the car, then the car drives and they jump out of the car, and it was a pretty cool movie. They're doing a big oneer type situation. Those are always really tricky. So Birdman was definitely a standout project.
The thing I always admired and I liked about my job covering sports was that I knew when I went to the ballpark that day, I was probably going to see something that I had never seen before. I could never plan for the day. I could plan for what I wanted to do that day, but I could never plan for how the thing was going to turn out. And it always excited me. And I didn't realize it until, for the last few years, I have not been around the ballpark, and you kind of miss that adrenaline. So I'm wondering now if you say you're between things right now. I mean, do you still kind of think, oh man, I got to get back into this because I missed the thrill of it? Or do you get to a certain point where you're like, okay, I can wait. I'm just going to go to the next one.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I got a couple of projects I've been called about, and some are exciting and some are not so exciting. And yeah, I just, I think, obviously some people get older and bitter, but I don't think I'm getting that at all. I still really enjoy it. And yeah, I think I lean more on the side of, I can't wait to go back to work, and do something cool. 'Cause you're being creative, all day. You're figuring stuff out, you're problem solving, you're using your brain, you're using everything you have and experiences from where you've been forever. And it's enjoyable to apply all that, and then to see the finished product up on a screen or on a TV, and then to have people talking about it. So yeah, it's far and few between where the projects get noticed, but every one is an experience, no matter how big or how small. There's always an experience to be had. So yeah, I still have the thrill, quite, we don't really retire in this business. You pretty much do it until you die. It's like, it is truly a way of life, and physically, as long as physically you can do it. But I've even seen people that are barely physically able to do it are still doing it because they just absolutely love it.
How much do you enjoy the ability to do different things on different projects? And is there one thing that kind of sticks out to you that says, this is what I kind of like to focus on now?
Yeah, I'm trying to kind of hedge my way into, being a known cinematographer. You pretty much throw away your resume each time you move up a position. You suddenly don't work, and it's been a really tough 8 years for me in this transition. And I'm also dealing with diversity, which is it's really tough to be a white male in this business, whether you're a director or a DP. You're not getting the jobs now. And I know that the white male has always had the jobs, and and it's time for other people, and the diversity is good. And everyone that's, deserving should be there. But it's tricky when you've worked for 33 years in the business, and you can't get a job. It's really tricky for a lot of people, and a lot of people are falling. And I watched my father kind of fall to that. So I tried to start a little side business to have that to fall back on in anticipation of that happening to me. So, you have to stay young, you have to stay current, you have to stay hip, to stay in the business. So it's, you constantly have to reinvent yourself. You have to try the cool stuff. You can't be old school, even though you are old school. I've had to adapt with the new school. The discipline isn't there that there used to be. We weren't even allowed to talk to actors. We weren't allowed to sit. We weren't allowed to eat on set. There was a whole, way to do things and etiquette, And now, my loader married Julia Roberts, and everyone's like dating everybody, and actors are with camera people and grips, and it's a whole it's good. The whole business has evolved into this different world. It's quite different, but yeah, I truly do enjoy going to work every day, and trying to do the coolest things out there. So yeah, I'm trying to point myself in a direction to do movies. It's tough to do movies. TV is a little easier to fall into, and that's where I've kind of fallen into, is the streaming networks. That's kind of like and you can go places from there too. You can do a streaming show like Ozark, or something, and you get noticed because it's a great looking show. It's a great acted show, and the stories are good, and people go places from there. So I try to line myself up with the jobs that are going to get noticed, basically, and those are usually visual jobs that help me get noticed. Like a comedy is not going to do anything for me other than pay my bills for in the meantime. But doing something cool is really where you want to involve yourself. You want to involve yourself with the best team out there. You kind of try to make that your life and make that your universe. So yeah, it's a little bit kind of pre-thought out, way to go, but you never know where you're going.
Yeah, the streaming thing is interesting because you and I grew up in a time where there were 4 TV channels. You had the NBC, CBS, ABC, and a Fox. Maybe
Yeah,
we didn't have Fox when we were growing up. And now it's like I turn on my television and I look and I'm like, okay, do I go to Hulu? Do I go to
yeah,
Netflix, Prime
yeah,
Video? Let's see, there's Apple Plus.
yeah.
It's almost intimidating, I think, because a lot of
It
people will
is.
talk about shows, and I'm like, wait a minute, I haven't caught up on that one yet. I mean, I can't
Yeah,
get to this one yet. I have too much time invested in the other one. But
yeah,
I think the point I'm trying to get to is that I've kind of evolved with it because you can see some different things. Now, I bet you could take some different risks and chances when you're talking about streaming rather than something that's going to live forever in a theater or on video, for goodness sakes, or whatever. But is that the case? And also just the fact that there are more things now than there were then to really get involved in.
yeah. No, there are a lot more things. I did a great project. That's actually really a horrible project. Last year called Monster, and it was basically about Jeffrey Dahmer. You know, and it was just weird because, in fact, Ernie says that he knows one of the guys that was killed by Jeffrey Dahmer, that he went to school with him, and he passed the baton to him. But anyway, we did that project last year, and obviously, it's the first time I've ever done something that's a true story. So everything we were doing happened, like the body parts and the refrigerator and stuff. And the studio actually offered us therapy. I mean, it was, and the actor didn't show up 2 days on the show, and it was, so, it's really wild because you could be doing a comedy and it's funny and great, but you're doing a serious, true story, and it's pretty gnarly what we go through, and for months at a time, and hours of the day. We do 12 hours minimum a day, and but to your question, or your comment about streaming, yeah, I mean, it's just, there's so much out there that it actually opens up opportunities to go multiple places and do multiple different kinds of cool projects. So it's actually really great. I mean, it is really fantastic because there were a certain amount of movies. Big movies were done by the big guys. Medium movies were done by the medium guys, and then there's the small movies. It's everyone else trying to make a Juno or something like that. A movie that gets noticed that is very small and takes people places. That movie took people places, and it was a very simple, coming of age kind of kids movie, and bam, so there's a lot more opportunities now with the streaming. I mean, geez, and you could actually come up with an idea, take it to Apple or Netflix, and they'll buy it from you. I mean, like, there's actually there's so much more content, and with COVID, like, the content was all watched, and the binge watching, I'm guilty. I watched.
Oh yeah, me too.
I got COVID, and I watched all 3 seasons of Stranger Things during my 10-day COVID thing. So yeah, it's definitely a different way to do things, but I think it's a good thing. I think it's really good for the business. But the content, there's so much more content out there. It's great. It's really a good thing.
I know you're in LA now, but you are a Chicago guy. I have to imagine you're pretty happy with the way that Chicago has kind of put itself on the map as a place where people want to go to shoot not only their big screen movies, but their television shows as well.
Yep.
There's a Chicago everything on NBC.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's fantastic, and the teams there are fantastic. My dad, originally from Chicago, moved to LA because that's where the work was, Hollywood. But now tax incentives are coming from states: Atlanta, Chicago, Detroit had one, Michigan had one, New Mexico's really big right now. And it's great because it brings revenue to the cities and people, but the crews in Chicago are fantastic, whereas before it was everyone had moved out. You had a couple of good crews, and the main show got the good crew, and then there was no other good crew. But now they're making a name, and the studios that have popped up, and all the services and the cameras and the lights and cranes, and yeah, it's a great place to work. I wish I could work there more often, but I am traveling more because LA is not the place anymore for making movies. But yeah, I've been lucky enough to be home for a while. I got 2 kids, so that's tough. I'm hoping one of them gets in, both girls, so they should do well in the industry now. My daughter could probably become a big DP faster than me at this point, and she's 18. But that's the way it is. So I'm actually hoping that she, capitalizes on that, with what she's learned from being on sets with me and such, and she'll have an advantage, because it's pretty, pretty saturated out there with people. Everyone wants to be in the industry now.
Okay, so as I mentioned at the very beginning, this is generally, more often than not, someplace we talk some sports, and I've enjoyed kind of getting away from it. But I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, at least, growing up in Chicago, you had to at least pay attention, right? I mean, you paid attention to the sports scene, didn't you?
Yeah. My grandpa was huge. He worked at the Tribune, and they took the L every day, and they never had a car, and so we'd go to the games. We'd go to Wrigley, and I just always had a love that I didn't even realize, for baseball mainly. And then, I was a huge football fan, a huge hockey fan, and car sports. I'm really big into that now. NASCAR. It's just it's part of our lives growing up. That's kind of what we did, and I was too small for most sports, but I was quick for football, but ended up in the business and then went that direction.
And now your buddy Ernie Skadden, who again is the big voice boomer that you hear at the beginning of our podcast and throughout the podcast as well, who's a good friend of John's. He is the manager or the head coach or the coach of the WGN Radio softball team.
Oh, wow.
And you should hear his post game interviews. He is polished as all can be. I'm telling you, he says all the right things. Oh yeah.
Oh wow, I did not know that. Well, I'm gonna have to get more in touch with that for sure, because that's something I enjoy. That's cool.
Yeah, I think you'll have to second guess him a couple of times just to to keep him on the straight and narrow.
I will.
I trust that you will. I trust that you will. Thank you. Thank you for doing that, and thanks for taking the time. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed the conversation. I mean, it's not every day you get to talk about the inner workings of Hollywood and the movies, and now with, of course, Maverick coming out and being out and having all the accolades it's gotten so far. I mean, just all the great press it's gotten. I can't wait to see it, and I'd love to get your impressions when you actually see it.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna go see it tonight, and yeah, let's talk again for sure, anytime.